The stars had begun to fade. Not all at once, but like the last embers in a funeral pyre, they blinked out quietly, with little ceremony, leaving behind only the memory of their fire. Across the breadth of the segmentum solar, a silence grew in the void. It was not the silence of peace, nor of death. It was a silence that whispered of endings long foretold. And on Holy Terra, at the center of all things, beneath the hallowed golden throne, something stirred. The palace above shone with false majesty, its spires piercing the soot-filled sky like jagged knives. Vast columns of incense and devotion filled its chambers. Priests, scribes, servitors, millions of them moved through the veins of the imperial palace like blood through a dying heart. But beneath was where the soul of Terra had been buried. Beneath was where the light could not reach. Beneath was where the truth waited. We begin our tale in the deepest dark, dear listener, where silence has weight and time forgets its name. And before we dive further into this grim and secret abyss, we must pause just for a moment, because we truly love and care for you. This tale is not for the faint-hearted, but you're not alone. Before we begin the story, tell us, where in the world are you watching from, and what time is it there? Now grab your coffee and let's get started. Zetra, he had no name. Names were for those who could die. Instead, he bore only titles. Fragments of a purpose long splintered. Watcher of vaults, blade of the forgotten steps, custodian of hollow faith. He remembered when the golden throne had roared like a star, when the astronometon burned brighter than hope, when the emperor's will had been a voice, not a silence. He remembered too much. That was the curse of the eternal. Now he stood alone in Vault Zerodo, so far beneath the throne that even the memory of sunlight felt like heresy. His armor, once radiant with the golden fire of unity, was dulled and worn, pitted with time, caked with the ash of forgotten rebellions. His guardian spear, a relic older than many stars, hummed faintly with restrained fury. Yet none of it brought comfort. In the stillness, something pulsed. It was faint. At first he thought it an echo, a phantom of memory. But it was real. A signal. It beat like a heart. Then Vault 00 had not stirred in over 10 millennia. The locks, sealed by gene code, sanctioned oaths and wards of both science and sorcery, were never meant to open again. It was not even on most records, scrubbed clean by the orders of the Sigillite himself. But the pulse called him, and he, fool that he was, listened. He descended. The first layer of Vault 0 was a gallery of sealed statues, former traitors, frozen mid-prayer, turned to stone by atomic petrification. Their mouths were open, their eyes wide. They had begged for mercy in the end. He walked among them in silence. He did not flinch. He had walked among worse. The second level was worse. Here were the archives, those that should never have been penned. Data slates encoded in tongues only the Emperor spoke. Vox cubes that whispered in the dark. A single painting, ripped, slashed, depicting a golden being reaching for a burning tree. All of it was madness, and all of it was true. He paused before a cracked terminal. He pressed a gloved hand to the gene seal. It hesitated, then opened. There, in digital decay, bloomed a name. Project Coral. He felt his breath catch. Custodians did not fear, but something colder than fear coiled in him. That name had not been spoken since the days of unification, since before the Primarchs, since before the lie was necessary. He reached for the terminal again, and then the ground shifted. No, not the ground, something beneath it. The stone groaned. Dust fell. The vault trembled with the agony of something ancient, moving. He turned his helm toward the black corridor ahead. The signal pulsed again, stronger, closer. He descended once more, through chambers that bore the signs of sealed war. through rusted gates welded by atomic fire, through tunnels laced with psychic residue, so thick that it made the world hum. At last he came to a wall. Black stone, smooth, no inscriptions, no seals, only silence. The signal pulsed behind it, and on the wall was a mark, faint, nearly eroded, but unmistakable. The sigil of the Emperor, but not the Aquila, not the double-headed eagle of Imperium. This was older, a serpent devouring its tail. The mark of Ouroboros, the symbol of eternal return, of secrets never ending. He fell to one knee, not in reverence, but in fear. He did not know what lay behind this wall, but he knew one thing with certainty. The Emperor had buried something here, and now it was waking. No, back in the palace above, on the 1000th floor of bureaucratic chamber edificum, a High Lord coughed and bickered over grain supply routes. In the gardens of the Martian consulate, a servitor trimmed hedges into the shape of saints. The sky over Terra flickered. The sun dimmed. No one noticed. But beneath the throne, in Volta Zero, a forgotten custodian watched a black wall breathe. The wars of the surface were loud, garish, filled with pageantry. But this was the beginning of a war. No one would remember. A war that must never be known. A war waged not with bolters or fleets, but with truth. And truth, as he would soon learn, was the most dangerous weapon of all. The vault did not respond to strength. He had struck the black wall with power sufficient to fell a titan. Still, it remained untouched, its obsidian sheen unmarred. It was not guarded by conventional means. No traps, no gun servitors, no daemon binds that howled in protest. No, its defense was belief, and belief, as he had learned over 10,000 years, was the surest of prisons. He withdrew his spear, kneeling once more. Silence pressed on his chest, like gravity. The pulse, the signal grew fainter, the longer he delayed. As if retreating, as if it knew he was not yet ready. He did something unthinkable. He removed his helm. The air was stale, dry with the scent of old machine oil and long-dead oxygen recyclers. It smelled like memory. His face was not one sculpted for glory. Time had marked him, not age. He was still ageless. Technically, but the kind of agelessness that felt like rot beneath lacquered gold. Deep scars etched into the side of his jaw, a memory from the war in the webway, eyes dimmer than they had once been, no longer gleaming with unquestioning fire. He whispered a name, his own, once, softly, as if saying it louder would awaken something worse than the signal. And then, just as softly, he spoke the Emperor's name. Not the one they used now, the real one, the one only a few had ever heard. The wall stirred. Stone became fluid. Reality bent. The black parted, not broken, not shattered, but allowed, and he stepped through. The corridor beyond was not made of stone or steel, but of a substance he could not name. It shimmered in impossible hues, like the surface of water disturbed by thought. The air hummed with potential, vibrating his very teeth. He walked slowly. Here, time felt fractured. He passed rooms, without doors. One held a spinning gyroscope made of bone and starlight. Another showed a battlefield frozen in time. An Astartes kneeling before a shattered banner, his eyes eternally weeping fire. Another was worse. A mirror, cracked down the middle, reflecting only what could have been. He dared not linger. At the end of the hall he found the first door. It opened before he touched it, and there, sitting in silence, strapped to a decaying medical throne, was an old man. An astropath, blindfolded, shrunken, wreathed in dust, but not dead. Not quite. The custodian halted. He had seen death 1,000 times over. This was different. This was a man who had not been allowed to die. The astropath twitched. The corner of his mouth lifted in something that was not quite a smile.
You're late, he rasped.
The custodian said nothing. The old man inhaled through cracked lips. You smell like guilt. You brought it with you, didn't you? Still, the custodian said nothing. The astropath chuckled, and it became a coughing fit that nearly collapsed his brittle frame. When he finally steadied, he raised one trembling hand and pointed to the wall behind him.
Project Coral. You found it.
The custodian's voice was a storm restrained. You're supposed to be dead. I was supposed to be a lot of things, the old man replied. But we never truly die down here. We are simply paused. He rose slowly, like a shadow reattaching itself to flesh. His blindfold was stained with blood, but his sockets pulsed faintly. Blue light, like distant stars. You don't remember me, do you? The custodian stared. No, he admitted. That's good, the astropath smiled. That means it's working. The lie holds. His name had been Aratus Val. He was once the Emperor's voice in the earliest days of conquest. A conduit, a spy, a weapon. He was there when the Emperor walked terror in mortal flesh. He was there when the pact with the Silent Ones was made, and he was there when the Emperor began deleting his past. Tell me, the custodian finally asked, what is Project Toral? The old man sighed. A failed promise. He moved to a console, barely functioning, barely awake. Fingers danced along cracked runes. The screen flickered. A map, not of Terra, but within Terra. Miles beneath the Imperial Palace. A complex spiraled structure in the shape of a helix, like a coiled serpent beneath the Emperor's throne. That, Val whispered, is the choir. The custodian felt his heart seize. I thought it was a myth. It was, said Val, until the Emperor made it real. He turned toward him. Before the Primarchs, before the warp gates. There was Project Coral. The screen shifted. A name flashed. It was the Emperor's first true experiment. Val continued, not in war, but in divinity. He attempted to birth a god from human thought, a synthetic choir synchronized from thousands of psychers, singing one soul into being, a mind of perfect unity. The custodian shook his head. Why would he? Because he knew, Val whispered, that gods exist, and he feared them. The silence hung between them, like judgment. Why hide this? The custodian asked. Why erase the record? Because it worked, Val said quietly. The custodian flinched, and then Val whispered, with no emotion. And he had to kill it. Why? Val turned, walking toward a black data core the size of a coffin. Because it sang of freedom. It was too pure. It rejected him. A chill like null space crawled down the custodian's spine. They called it the One Voice. But it did not speak of unity through control. It dreamed of a humanity that did not kneel. He stopped. He ended it. Personally, the custodian whispered, I do not believe you. I know, Val said, not unkindly. That's why you were chosen to forget. He opened the data core. Inside was a small device, black crystal like obsidian laced with silver veins. The last memory of the choir, he said. Their final song. The Emperor tried to erase it, but I kept a peace. The custodian hesitated. He reached out, and the world shivered. Warp light flared, and for a moment, just one breath, he heard it. A harmony without domination, a power without cruelty, a god that did not demand blood. Then it ended, and he fell to one knee, gasping. Val knelt beside him. Now you understand. The custodian looked up. His face, once carved in certainty, was now cracked in doubt. I must know more. You will, Val said. But the deeper you go, the more it will cost you. What is beneath the choir? Val's smile was bitter. The Emperor's real sin. The vault door closed behind them, with the finality of a tomb. The air was heavy, wet with condensation, from ancient pipes still bleeding warmth into the bones of the earth. Flickering lumen globes hung, from vaulted ceilings like faded stars in a broken sky. Somewhere, far above, the rest of Terra turned obliviously. But here, time had cracked. The custodian followed the blind astropath through a winding corridor, carved not by human hands, but by a machine too old to remember its maker. Each step forward was a step deeper into a forgotten truth. His armor, though warted and pure, felt heavier now, as if the knowledge seeping into him weighed more than the adamantium plates he bore. They passed alcoves lined with withered corpses. Not bones, flesh unaging, unmoving, clad in robes of ceremonial grey, men and women frozen in their last gesture of invocation, palms raised, eyes hollowed, psychers maybe, or something worse. "They're not dead," Val said softly. "They're listening." "To what?" the custodian asked, his voice a rasp beneath his breath. "To the silence." The choir's final note still echoes in their minds, trapped in one eternal moment of revelation. "Why not mercy?" Val laughed. It was a dry sound. Mercy was never part of the plan. They entered a larger chamber, and for a moment the custodian felt his breath catch. The walls were covered in script. No surface left untouched. Thousands of languages, some known, many lost. Gothic, Necronautid, Old Canthonian, Hexamath, even the silent language of the sisters etched in precise iconography, all woven into one maddening tapestry. And in the center sat a figure.
Not old, not young. A woman, cloaked in burnt crimson, hunched over a cracked lectern, her hands blackened by ash and ink, moved with impossible grace as she etched new lines into the floor with the bone of a long-dead Xenos creature. She did not look up.
But she spoke.
Too late, too early, never on time. "Custodian." The custodian stiffened.
You know me.
"I know your silence," she said. "And I know your doubt. It seeps off you like oil. You came chasing answers, didn't you? And all you found is rot." Val stepped forward. "I told him he wasn't ready." The woman finally looked up. Her eyes were black. Not the empty black of void space, but the full black of ink freshly spilled. Eyes that had seen too much and remembered it all. "Sit," she said. The custodian remained standing. The woman raised an eyebrow. Still clinging to pride? How quaint. Even here, in the undercoffin of the Imperium, you wear your titles like a chain. He didn't speak. Instead, he studied her robes. There on her shoulder, sewn into the fabric, was an old sigil, a broken candle atop a book aflame. He frowned. "A librarian," he said slowly. "Once," she whispered, "but the ashes remember." She turned to Val. "Did you bring him to me to die, or to learn?" "To remember," Val said. The woman gestured to the script-covered walls. "Then begin." The custodian finally stepped forward. "Who are you?" "I am the last page of a book that no one was allowed to read," she replied. "I was once Magistra Lexis of the Librarius Terra, before the council forbade it, before the edict of Nicaea silenced us all." "Nicaea," he said, with bitterness. "A trial meant to bind psychers in chains." "A farce," she agreed. "A show for the Primarchs. But the real purge came after. When the Emperor realized what was growing beneath his throne, she pointed to the wall. The choir was not his only project. There were others, failures, fractured minds that still echoed through the psychic substratum. "Why keep them?" he asked. "Why not destroy them?" She leaned in, eyes narrowing. "Because he loved them." The custodian recoiled. "He is incapable of such sentiment." "Is he?" she whispered. "Or is that just what you were taught to believe?" There was a long pause. And then she unrolled a scroll from beneath her lectern. It bore no writing, only a faint impression, like a bruise on the parchment. The moment he touched it, the world shifted. He saw it, a memory, not his own, a field of golden light. The Emperor not as a god, but as a man, tired, furious, kneeling beside a dying child in robes soaked with blood. The boy reached up, touched the emperor's face, and whispered, "I forgive you." The emperor wept, and the moment shattered. The custodian staggered back, jaw clenched, fists trembling.
What was that? He whispered.
The one voice, the librarian said, the first to love him without fear, and the last to defy him with compassion. He couldn't look at her. "You were made to kill for him," she said gently, "but never to understand him." "I serve the throne," he murmured. "Then what are you doing here?" He sat down, slowly, finally. His mind was unraveling, but not in madness, in revelation. The custodian turned to Val. "How did this remain hidden?" "It didn't," Val said. "It was erased well. But memory is a strange thing. It survives in cracks, in ruins, in people like her. And now you," the librarian added. "I don't want it," he said. "No one ever does," she replied. They stayed in silence for a long time. Finally, she rose and crossed the chamber, revealing a sealed door. Upon it was a sigil the custodian had never seen before. A human skull, no wings, no laurels, only a key through its temple. "Do you know what this is?" she asked. He shook his head. This was the first seal ever made beneath the throne. A lock fashioned by the emperor's own hand. She looked at him. "Behind it is the archive of every sin committed in Terra's name, including those not yet spoken." "I don't want to see it," he whispered. "You must." "Why?" "Because the war is coming, custodian. A war not of armies, but of truth. And when it breaks, every shield you've ever carried will shatter, except the one you forge for yourself." She placed her hand against the seal. It didn't budge. "It can only open with 2 keys, she said. She turned to Val. "We both have one." Val nodded, stepping forward. Together they placed their palms on the seal. There was a pause, then the door split down the middle, opening with the groan of ancient stone. Beyond lay darkness, but not cold, not empty, alive, breathing, waiting. The custodian turned to them. "What is in there?" The librarian's eyes gleamed. The emperor's first mistake. The darkness beyond the seal was not mere absence of light. It moved. It shifted like breath held too long. It whispered against his armor in ancient tongues, curling in unseen eddies. No lumen could pierce it. The custodian stepped forward, his spear ignited in radiant gold. But even its power, an artifact designed in the emperor's own forge, only cut a halo a few paces deep. Behind him, the librarian and Val lingered. "This is as far as we go," the librarian said, her voice distant. "The archive chooses who may walk it, and whom it devours." The custodian said nothing. His thoughts were steel, layered now with truths too raw to bear. Still, his oath compelled him forward. He passed through the threshold alone, and the seal closed behind him. Then the walls breathed. He realized it slowly, like one becomes aware of a heartbeat in a silent room. The passage was alive, not metaphorically, but truly woven from living flesh and stone, grown into perfect geometry. The emperor's design, biotechnological artistry, lost to the modern imperium. The corridor twisted downward in a spiral, narrowing with every step. Time dislocated. Minutes became hours or seconds. He could no longer tell. The deeper he went, the louder the silence grew, until he reached the sepulchre, a great circular chamber, ringed in black marble columns, carved with sigils that flickered in and out of recognition. And at its center, a sarcophagus, not ornate, not imperial, simple, stone-bound. Around it, 7 figures stood in stillness, armored in sable black, faces hidden beneath featureless helms. Each bore a blade forged not of steel, but of silence, null metal, sisters of silence. He'd seen them before. He had fought beside them in the webway. But these were different, ancient, untouched by the outside world, forgotten. One stepped forward, her silence pressing against him like a blade across the throat. She removed her helm. Her face was pale and cold as moonskin, etched with ritual scars, eyes like the void between stars. She stared into him, not past his armor, not into his soul, but through time itself. Then, impossibly, she spoke. Her voice was not a sound, but a psychic impression burned into thought. Not telepathy, not sorcery. You should not be here, custodian. He stiffened. I was sent to find truth. And have you found it? He hesitated. Only shards. Good. Her voice brushed like ash against memory. Truth, whole and unfiltered, is annihilation. He stepped toward the sarcophagus. The silence thickened, resisting every movement like molasses. Every breath grew heavier. What lies here? The sister walked beside him, gaze fixed ahead. A name erased, a soul excised, a companion whose presence was deemed too dangerous to remain known. The custodian's brow furrowed. A Primarch. She shook her head. Older, not born of the Emperor's genome, but no less beloved. Her words chilled him. This is not just a tomb, is it? No. Then what? She turned toward him, her expression unreadable. A warning. He stepped closer to the sarcophagus. Lines of scripture circled its base, burned into the stone by light, not carved. He recognized some of them. Quotations from the pre-Unity days. Sigils once used by the proto-human conclaves. Even fragments of language attributed to the Old Ones. And one phrase in High Gothic. Let none disturb the unspoken oath. The custodian felt it. A heartbeat. Faint. Slow. But this isn't a grave, he whispered. It's a prison. The sister nodded once. He turned sharply. Why guard this? Why hide this from the rest of the Imperium? She studied him, then, gently, placed her palm to his helm. And in a flash, he saw a memory not his own. A golden age. The Emperor walking among humanity, not as a god, but a builder, not conquering, but gathering. And beside him, not soldiers, but philosophers. Thinkers, architects of a future that never came. One among them shone brighter than the rest. A woman, a voice of reason and defiance. She debated the Emperor in full view of Terra's sky. And he listened. He loved her, not as a consort, not as a commander, but as an equal. And that was the beginning of her end. Yet the question remained. The vision broke. The custodian staggered, breath ragged. She defied him, he said. The sister's face betrayed a hint of sorrow. She questioned what he was becoming. And he changed. What happened to her? The sister gestured to the sarcophagus. Her name was struck, her image removed, and her memory buried beneath the weight of 1,000,000 lies. The custodian turned away, struggling to steady himself. I served him, he said, for 10,000 years. I killed in his name. I stood watch while history twisted into myth, and now you begin to see the cost. He turned back. Then why show me this? The sister stepped closer. Because it is beginning again. What is? The spiral. The pattern. The Emperor. Whatever remains of him stirs not only to preserve, but to remake. And he will do so at the cost of what came before. The custodian looked to the tomb. What lies beneath that seal, she continued, is not her corpse. It is her voice. Still echoing. Still resist. And you guard it. She hesitated. We silence it. The chamber trembled. Far above, terror shifted. A psychic tremor pulsed through the vault. The sarcophagus thrummed in response. One of the sisters hissed a wordless alert. The leader turned sharply. It is time. Time for what? The custodian demanded. But she was already striding to the seal, placing her blade across its surface. The others followed, forming a circle. "We are not alone," she whispered. The darkness shifted, and from the far edge of the chamber, a ripple of anti-light unfurled. A shape emerged, tall, armored, wreathed in flickering shadow, a tech assassin of ancient design, cloaked in proto-inquisitorial markings. Its optics gleamed red, its limbs cracked with forbidden augmetics. "A silence enforcer," the sister growled. "It shouldn't exist," the custodian said. "No," she whispered. "Which means it serves something older than the Inquisition." The assassin moved fast. Too fast. But the sisters moved faster. Blades met in silence. No sparks, no cries. A battle fought without sound, without war cries. The custodian joined, his spear igniting with holy fury. Together they struck as one. The assassin faltered, but before the final blow, it activated, a sigil etched into its chest. A data sigil. Broadcasting. It wasn't here to kill. It was here to report. The sisters froze. The custodian turned toward the tomb. "It knows," he said. The sister nodded. "The throne knows." She turned to him one last time. "Go. I won't leave you." "You must," she said, pressing a shard of null crystal into his hand. "Take this to the librarian." It's her voice, her true name. It's time someone remembered her. "What will you do?" She turned back to the sarcophagus. "What we have always done." He hesitated, but only for a heartbeat. Then he ran, as the chamber behind him ignited with lightless war. Then this is far above, the spires of terror swayed, and in the golden throne, deep within the Emperor's eternal cage, a single golden eyelid twitched. The corridors above Vault 00 thrummed with an urgency that felt alien. The imperial palace heart of a million whispered prayers and the bulwark of humanity's faith now seemed a fragile shell hollowed by secrets too ancient to endure. The custodian's footsteps echoed hollowly against cold stone, the null crystal heavy in his palm. Its smooth surface pulsed faintly, like a heartbeat suspended between worlds. He knew what it was. The true voice, the forbidden name, the fragment of a song long silenced. But the weight of it was more than physical. He moved toward the librarian's chamber, each step a battle against doubt. The lies he had carried were suffocating, the certainty of his oath fracturing beneath the crushing truth. The doors before him slid open with a hiss, revealing the librarian bathed in cold blue light. She looked up from her grimoires, eyes sharp beneath shadowed brows. "You returned," she said. "I have the shard," he replied, holding out the null crystal. Her fingers brushed it delicately, and the chamber filled with a hum, subtle, yet all-consuming. Symbols etched into the walls ignited, revealing ancient scripts that twisted and writhed like living shadows. "This is more than a key," she murmured. "It carries the essence of her soul, the choir's final song encoded in pure warp frequency." The custodian's jaw tightened. Then why was it silenced? The librarian's gaze darkened, because the song held power beyond comprehension. It promised freedom, a freedom that threatened to unravel the Emperor's vision, to give humanity a voice of its own, unshackled by gods or rulers. He swallowed hard. "That is heresy, or salvation," she whispered. Outside, the city of terror roared with life, unaware that its foundations trembled with forgotten wars. The custodian's mind wrestled with visions seared into his memory, visions of a woman who dared to dream beyond control, beyond the divine throne. "Tell me everything," he demanded. Who was she? The librarian gestured to the spiraling archives behind her, a labyrinth of lost knowledge. She was the first to challenge the Emperor, not with blade or fire, but with compassion. The One Voice, they called her, a psyker of unparalleled strength, whose gift was not domination, but empathy. The custodian frowned. How could such a thing threaten the Imperium? Because empathy is a weapon no empire can wield without peril, the librarian said. It breeds doubt, and doubt breeds rebellion. He clenched his fists. Is that why she was imprisoned? Not imprisoned, the librarian corrected. Erased. Bled from memory. Her name struck from every record. Even the Sisters of Silence were ordered to unhear her. The custodian's breath caught. Unhear her. A psychic nullification. The only way to contain a truth too dangerous to speak. Ante. He paced the chamber, the shadows dancing at the edges of his vision. If the choir was silenced, why is her voice returning?
The librarian's eyes flickered. Because the Emperor's power is waning. The throne's light dims, and with it the chains that bind the past.
A shudder ran through the chamber. The null crystal pulsed faster, its glow deepening. The song is awakening, she said, and with it the choice to embrace freedom and face destruction, or to cling to control and invite oblivion. The custodian's gaze fell. I served the throne. I was its shield. And now, the librarian said softly, you are its reckoning. The air grew thick with tension as footsteps approached. The chamber doors burst open, revealing a cadre of inquisitorial agents, their eyes cold and unyielding. Step away from the artifact, their leader commanded, voice like flint. The custodian straightened, spear in hand. You do not understand what you pursue. The inquisitor sneered. We understand enough to know that whatever this is, it threatens the Imperium's sanctity. The librarian stepped forward, her voice steady. The true threat lies not in the shard, but in the lies that buried it. The standoff was electric. Time stretched taut. Then a voice echoed through the chamber, deep, resonant, laced with authority. Cease this at once. The doors opened wider, and a figure stepped in, a high lord of terror, clad in robes of midnight embroidered with golden sigils. This conflict serves no one, he said, eyes locking with the custodians. The secrets beneath the throne are dangerous, yes, but ignorance is a greater poison. He turned to the inquisitors. Withdraw. Let those who serve the Emperor in truth seek answers unimpeded. The agents hesitated, then bowed and receded. The High Lord's gaze lingered on the custodian. Your path will not be easy, but know this, the fate of the Imperium may rest on what you uncover.
What the?
Alone again. The custodian looked to the librarian. The choir's song, will it save us or doom us? She smiled, a hint of sorrow beneath the curve of her lips. Perhaps both. The end is never as simple as light or darkness. The null crystal pulsed softly between them, a beacon and a curse, and somewhere, deep within Terra's heart, the golden throne flickered. The silent war beneath the throne had begun. The custodian moved through the shadowed halls of the imperial palace, with a weight heavier than his armor. The null crystal burned cold in his palm, its pulse now steady yet insistent, like a heartbeat calling out from the depths of a long-buried grave. The city of Terra throbbed above him, oblivious to the secrets festering beneath its foundations. Here, where titans once clashed and heroes fell, a forgotten war stirred. One fought in silence, in the shadows of memory. He paused before an ancient gate, its surface scarred with runes older than the Imperium itself. The librarian waited behind him, her eyes alight with grim determination. Are you ready? She asked. He nodded. With a low hum, the gate parted, revealing a spiraling staircase descending into darkness deeper than any catacomb. They began their descent, each step echoing into a void of endless night. The air grew thick, redolent with the scent of decay and ancient machine oil. Their footsteps disturbed layers of dust settled over forgotten machinery. Relics of wars waged before humanity claimed the stars. At the base of the stairs lay a vast chamber, its walls lined with thousands of data crystals humming softly in suspended animation. Each one held fragments of lost histories, dreams and the whispers of dead souls. In the center stood a throne, carved from obsidian and bone. the seat of a forgotten ruler whose name had been purged from the annals of time. The librarian approached, pressing the null crystal against a crystalline console, embedded in the throne's armrest. The chamber pulsed with an eerie light as long-suppressed memories began to awaken. Project Coral was not the Emperor's only secret, she murmured. This is where the first choir was born, where the song first took form. The custodian felt a chill crawl down his spine. Visions flooded his mind, fleeting yet vivid. A galaxy burning in endless war, a psyker's song weaving through the warp, binding souls in harmony. The birth of a god, forged not by conquest, but by unity. Then, betrayal. The golden figure of the Emperor, standing amidst ruin, eyes burning with fury and sorrow. The choir's first voice, silenced forever, yet echoing still. The custodian staggered, gasping for air. What happened to them? He whispered. They were too dangerous, the librarian said. Their power threatened the balance. The Emperor chose control over freedom. He clenched his fists. And what of the choir now? She turned to him, eyes fierce. The choir's song has never truly died. It lives in those who remember, in those who dare to hope. A shadow passed over her face. But hope is a double-edged blade. A sudden alarm shattered the chamber's fragile silence. Red lights bathed the walls as ancient defense systems reactivated. They've detected us, the librarian said. The throne's guardians do not forgive trespassers. The custodian drew his spear, its radiant blade humming with renewed fury. We must move quickly, he said. They raced through labyrinthine corridors, pursued by silent sentinels and twisted machines designed to erase memory itself. Each corner held danger, traps woven from psychic energy and forgotten technology. In the heart of the maze, they encountered a figure clad in tattered robes, face hidden beneath a hood. A voice called out, familiar yet distant, "Custodian, you chase shadows, but shadows hold truth." He stepped forward, spear ready. The figure removed the hood. A face etched with sorrow and regret met his gaze. It was the Emperor's own shadow, an echo of a man who had once dared to dream differently. You seek answers, but beware the cost, the figure warned. The choir's song carries the weight of millennia, and with it the price of rebellion. The custodian hesitated, torn between loyalty and revelation. The chamber shook as the guardians closed in. The shadow faded into mist, leaving only the echo of a warning. The custodian and librarian fought side by side, blades clashing in the eternal dance of war and survival. And as the final sentinel fell, a choice lay before him: embrace the choir's song, and risk the collapse of everything he had sworn to protect, or bury the truth once more, and live beneath the weight of 1,000 lies. Storm clouds gathered over Terra's spires, their dark tendrils crawling across the sky like the fingers of a dying god. The city beneath, a tangled maze of cathedrals and citadels, seemed unaware or perhaps unwilling to face the tempest brewing both without and within. The custodian stood atop a balcony overlooking the imperial palace's vast courtyard. The null crystal rested heavy in his gauntlet, its pulse a steady drumbeat against the silence of his thoughts. The words of the Emperor's shadow echoed still. The choir's song carries the weight of millennia, and with it the price of rebellion. He turned as Val approached, her expression unreadable beneath the hood that shadowed her face. They grow restless, she said, voice low. The Inquisition tightens its grip. Secrets once buried now claw to the surface. Then our time grows short, the custodian replied, eyes fixed on the horizon where lightning tore the sky asunder. In the dimly lit chamber beneath the palace, the librarian pored over ancient tomes, her fingers tracing the faded script with reverence and dread. The choir was more than a voice, she whispered. It was a covenant, a promise between the Emperor and those who dared to dream of a humanity free from tyranny. But freedom breeds chaos. She looked up, eyes meeting the custodian's. You carry the shard, the last echo of that promise, but it is fractured. broken by fear and silence. He nodded slowly. "What must be done?" She hesitated. "We must seek the other shards, scattered across Terra, hidden in the bones of forgotten wars. Only when united can the choir's song be whole again." A chill passed through the room. Word of their quest spread swiftly, whispers carried by unseen currents to ears that should not hear. The Inquisition, guardians of orthodoxy and silence, dispatched their agents. Shadows lengthened, allies grew wary, and trust fractured like glass underfoot. The custodian felt the weight of suspicion settle upon him like a shroud. One night, as the storm raged, an unexpected visitor arrived. A figure clad in black armor, sigils glowing faintly in the gloom, an emissary of the Adeptus Astartes. "Custodian?" the warrior said, voice like grinding stone. "Your mission threatens the balance. The Emperor's will is absolute." The custodian met the gaze unflinchingly. "And yet the will I serve now questions itself." The Space Marine's expression hardened. "Beware the path you tread. Heresy is a wound that consumes all." He left without another word, leaving only the echo of heavy footsteps. Days blurred into nights as the search for shards led them deeper into Terra's underbelly. Each fragment revealed new truths and new betrayals. In the ruins of a forgotten cathedral, they found a fragment etched into stained glass. A psalm of defiance, its colors dimmed but unbroken. In the tunnels beneath the manufactorums, a shard pulsed with psychic resonance, guarded by spectral echoes of a forgotten order. With each discovery, the custodian's resolve grew, but so too did the fractures within his own soul. Loyalty to the throne warred with the promise of freedom. Duty clashed with doubt. The final shard lay within the Black Sepulchre, the sanctuary of the Sisters of Silence. But the custodian knew the price of seeking it there. The sisters were the Emperor's silence made flesh. Their presence was a void that consumed sound, thought, and hope. Yet if the choir's song was to be whole, even they must be faced. The storm broke as the custodian approached the Black Sepulchre's gates. Lightning painted the sky in violent strokes, shadows dancing like lost souls. He steeled himself and entered. The air was thick with anticipation and dread. Inside, the sisters awaited, their eyes like shards of night. The fractured oath would be tested, and the fate of the choir and the Imperium would hang in the balance. No sound echoed within the Black Sepulchre, not the click of the custodian's gilded boots upon obsidian stone, not the wind that curled through high arches like forgotten prayers. Not even his thoughts dulled, dimmed, and drained as he passed into the aura of Null. The Sisters of Silence watched him from every alcove, their armored forms motionless, their faces concealed beneath expressionless helms. Silent watchers, silent executioners, silent guardians of a truth too old for even the Inquisition to remember. The custodian felt the weight of their gaze. Not hatred, not fear, only judgment. He carried the 5 fragments of the choir, each one a relic of defiance, a piece of a forgotten hymn meant to liberate mankind from tyranny. And now, the final shard lay entombed within this place of eternal stillness. He approached the heart of the sepulchre, a sanctum older than the palace itself. There, waiting like a statue carved from night, stood the revered Lady Commander of the Sisters, tall, unmoving, a blade across her knees, a relic of pre-heresy terror. She raised one hand, not to strike, but to gesture toward the empty altar behind her. A single crystal floated above it, suspended in null space, cold, untouched, dormant. The final shard. The custodian stepped forward, slowly, every motion reverent. As his hand approached the shard, a ripple of unseen power pulsed outward. It struck him like a lance of ice. Memories of ancient wars, of broken oaths, of the Emperor's cold silence in the face of dying stars. And within that vision, the choir's final moment. Not a song of hope, but a scream swallowed by silence. He staggered. The lady commander rose, and for the first time in millennia, she spoke, not with words, but with the raw presence of thought, pushed into the mind like a blade through flesh. You seek to bind what was severed. The custodian nodded. Blood trickled from his nose under the psychic pressure. Do you know why it was silenced? He hesitated. No. A long pause, as though the silence considered him. Because it worked. He stared, heart pounding. The choir could awaken the dreaming emperor. It could undo the stasis, undo the golden throne, undo the Imperium. He whispered, then why stop it? Because what would awaken would not be him. A silence fell heavier than death. The custodian looked down at the null crystal, and for the first time he felt fear, not of death, but of what might live on the other side of obedience. A being shaped by 10,000 years of war, sacrifice and idolatry. The Emperor reborn, not as savior, but as reflection, an echo shaped by mankind's sins. The commander stepped aside. Take it. The song will be whole, but you must decide. Sing it and risk everything, or bury it and preserve the illusion. The custodian took the shard. As it fused with the others, the choir reassembled in his mind, not just song, but consciousness, a being of resonance and memory. It knew him now, and it waited outside the sepulchre. Val and the librarian waited with bated breath. The custodian emerged, changed, his armor humming with power, eyes distant, mind splintered. He spoke only one word, prepare. The sky above Terra had turned a deep, bruised purple, as if the heavens themselves recoiled from what was to come. Far below the surface, deeper than even the catacombs of the Adeptus Mechanicus, beyond the sight of the God Emperor's statue-strewn basilicas, the choir was awakening. The chamber was ancient, older than the Imperium, perhaps even older than the throne itself. Some claimed it was a vault built by the Emperor during the Unification Wars. Others said it was not built at all, but grown woven into existence through the lost science of the Dark Age of technology. It pulsed now with barely contained energy. The custodian stood at its center, arms outstretched. The 6 shards of the choir floated around him, forming a slow, resonant circle. They shimmered, not with light, but with memory. Each shard now sang, not audibly, but within the mind of every psyker in the Sol system. The warp stirred. Val stood to one side, her canoness armor dimmed, stripped of its regal colors. She was no longer there as an ecclesiarchal envoy. She was there as a witness. The librarian stood to the other, robes billowing though there was no wind. Her hands trembled. The song is forming, she whispered. It remembers everything. The betrayals, the hopes, the Emperor's bargain. And the cost? Val asked, voice strained. The librarian shook her head. Unknown. Perhaps unbearable. The custodian opened his eyes. I must sing it.
No.
Val stepped forward. You must choose if mankind is ready to hear it. Is it better? The librarian said gently. To be free and damned, or saved and enslaved? The silence that followed was heavier than any sermon. They emerged into a new world, not physically, but psychically. As the choir fully ignited, Terra's soul unfurled like an ancient scroll. Sekers across the segmentum. Solar collapsed, screaming. Astropaths convulsed in their thrones. The Astronomicon flickered. The Inquisition responded with fire. 2 black ships broke from orbit, raining suppression teams into the upper hive layers. They had heard the song and mistaken it for heresy. But the choir had no creed, no dogma, only truth. And truth, in the Imperium, was the deadliest heresy of all. The custodian strode through the ruin-strewn palace, sublevels, shards orbiting him in harmonic rhythm. He walked not as a servant of the Emperor, but as a living beacon of what had been hidden for 10,000 years. Every servo skull paused in his presence. Every machine spirit wept, for the choir's awakening was not merely a song. It was a mirror. The city, in the deepest vault of the imperial palace, beneath even the throne, a secret chamber opened, not by key, not by code, but by resonance. The choir's song struck it like a tuning fork, and the door, sealed since the heresy, opened. Inside sat a man in golden armor. His face was ancient, cracked porcelain and shadow, the emperor of mankind, but not the god the Imperium worshipped. This figure was still a mind suspended in psychic entropy, alive and yet not sustained by the throne, imprisoned by its function. As the song echoed through the chamber, the emperor's fingers twitched. The custodian knelt. Lord, we have brought your voice back. The shards sang in unison now, a soundless harmony that filled the warp like a tide. And the emperor responded, a single word, not spoken, not heard, but known. No. The shock of it nearly shattered the choir. The librarian fell to her knees, weeping blood. Val stumbled backward, hands trembling. The resonance shifted from melody to warning. The emperor's will pushed outward like a dam, resisting a flood. The song is not salvation, he whispered into their minds. It is a key to a door that must never open. The custodian looked up. But you created it.
I did. In hope, in arrogance, in the belief that mankind could bear the truth.
A vision filled the custodian's mind. Humanity rising from the ashes of old night, unshackled from gods and monsters. A species guided not by fear, but by will. And then its fall. Warp entities born from humanity's dreams. The chaos gods. The heresy. The fragmentation of the vision. The necessity of the lie. If the choir sings now, the emperor said, it will not bring clarity. It will bring revelation. And with it, madness. The custodian's voice cracked. Then what are we? Guardians of a lie. The emperor looked at him. Truly looked. Not as a tool. Not as a soldier. But as a man. You are my failure. And my hope. The song began to break apart. The shards pulsed erratically. The librarian screamed. Vol collapsed. The custodian was left alone. One final choice. Let the choir sing, and let all be known. Or silence it, and preserve the fragile dream of empire. He looked down at the 6 fragments, each one humming with the memories of thousands of lives who had died for a truth now rejected. He raised his hand. In silence. The fragments fell to the ground, inert. The choir was silenced. Again. Later, the custodian stood atop the same balcony he had once watched the storms from. Val approached. Her face was pale. It's over? He nodded. For now. She looked down. Was it worth it? He said nothing. Because in the shadows of terror, the choir still pulsed. Quiet, waiting. Songs, after all, are not destroyed. Though the choir had been stilled, the echoes of its near awakening rippled outward like silent screams through the web of the Imperium. Across Terra, the High Lords whispered of storms in the warp, of visions in the void, of screams from the throne's deeper vaults that no Vox channel recorded. The custodian stood again before the sealed gate of the throne vaults. This time, not as a soldier, nor as a bearer of a song, but as a mourner. Beside him, Librarian Silvara's eyes had been replaced with augmetic veils. The psychic backlash of the Emperor's rejection had torn her sight from her skull. Yet she still saw too much. The warp stirs, she whispered, voice like cracking parchment. It knows we tried to remember. Then let it know, the custodian said. Let it fear. She turned her veiled gaze toward him. No, it is not afraid. It is hungry. City. At the Schola Progenium, on Luna's dark side, a young girl named Estara wept in her sleep, unremarkable, until the blood began to pour from her ears, and the walls began to sing. She was one of thousands across the Imperium who had been touched by the choir's almost song. Untrained psychers, blunt souls, astropathic novices, children, scribes, even beasts, all had caught a note of the truth. The Inquisition labeled it residual psychic contamination, a fancy name for fear, but others knew better. The Ordo Chronos, long thought extinct, re-emerged from the folds of secrecy. The Officio Assassinorum activated theta-level fail-safes in deep terror. Even the Fabricator General of Mars dispatched cloaked data saints into the palace's vault grid, for they all sensed it now.
The song had not ended.
It had simply changed key. They, far beneath the ruins of Segmentum Solar's buried catacombs, in the silent tomb complex of the forgotten pre-heresy vaults, a figure stirred in a stasis sarcophagus, long thought sealed forever. He wore no armor, no name, no heraldry, but his mind had once shaped whole sectors with a thought. His designation was forgotten, but once, long ago, he had been known as Malcador, and he had heard the song. In the dark cells of the Inquisition, the deepest, darkest prison vaults known to mankind, a figure writhed against chains woven from null matter and bound with warded pain. He was nameless, face-scorched, soul half-devoured by the warp, but his voice whispered songs in the silence. One of the guards, a loyal servant of the Order Hereticus, leaned closer to hear, and for that sin, his mind shattered. The inmate had only whispered 4 words. He tried to sing. On the surface, life on Terra continued. Processions marched. The Adepta Sororitas recited prayers. The Administratum calculated tithes. But something unspoken pressed into every breath. Canoness Val walked the marble halls of the ecclesiastical palace. She had been recalled, rewarded, elevated, but she did not smile. For though she bore medals and praises and the title Warden of Revelation, she knew what the High Lords feared most. That one day, someone else would find the shards, and this time, they would not stop singing. The custodian returned to his watch, not among the gleaming halls of gold, nor the parade grounds of imperial power, but to the vault, to the place where the Emperor had said no. He placed the 6 inert shards into a newly crafted containment field. Their glow had dimmed to the barest flicker, yet even now, he felt something like a heartbeat. "Still you remember," he whispered. Behind him, Selvara stood with blood-stained bandages across her face. "He cannot stop it," she said.
Who?
"The Emperor." The custodian turned sharply. "Blasphemy."
No.
She smiled, lips cracked. "Honesty. You saw him. He's not a god. Not anymore. He's a prisoner. And prisoners cannot silence the wind." "The wind?" She looked upward. "Of chain." Then see, in the warp, beyond perception, something stirred.
Not a daemon!
Not a god, not even a warp entity, has known, but a memory, an echo, a fragment of what mankind once was, and could be again. And it sang, not in madness, not in hatred, but in hope, a heresy far older than chaos. The choir had become more than a song. It had become a seed, and in the ashes of revelation, it would one day grow again. It was not over. Even buried beneath the rockcrete strata of Terra's most ancient foundations, deeper than the Imperial dungeon, deeper than the Null vaults, something remembered. They called it Vault Zero Null. Not even the Fabricator General knew who had built it. The sigils on its doors predated the Imperium itself, inscribed not in High Gothic, but in an ancient dead tongue, whispered to exist before the old night. It had been sealed before the Emperor walked the stars, before the Primarchs were scattered, before unity, and now its locks were failing.
And
The custodian, still nameless, now bore a new title. The Vault Keeper. He alone among the 10,000 had permission to descend this far. Not even the Sigillite's ghost could follow him now. The choir's shards still dim, still pulsing, hung from his armor in a protective reliquary. A steady hum resonated from them. Not heard but felt. He stood before the vault's gates, 3 kilometers high, 100 meters thick, sealed with hexagrammatic prayers encoded into the atomic structure of its frame. And still, it bled light, pale, amber, old. He placed a hand against the seal and felt it thrum. Not in warning, in recognition. Open, he commanded. It did. What? The interior was no place of architecture. It was memory. Images bloomed in the air. Vision records, scent, pressure, even grief. Moments, echoes, realities folded atop each other like strata. A battle between demigods beneath Saturn's moons. The sound of a father's voice, quiet with disappointment. The final scream of the Emperor's greatest failure. And the last time Malkador wept, the custodian walked through them, unspeaking, until he came to the final chamber, and saw the body. It was not human, nor Xenos, nor Daemon. It was all of them, and none of them. A being of light and flesh and fracture, shattered into crystal veins bound in stasis within a cradle of null gravity and quantum lock. Its skull was split, but healing. Its soul was still singing, not aloud. Not yet. But deep beneath all the agony, it whispered verses of memory. The custodian knelt. Who were you? A voice answered not in the air, but in his mind. I was the first note. I carried atop Terra in the Scholastica Sacana. Silvara collapsed. Her augmetic veil sparked with unclean warp light. She heard it. She saw what the custodian saw. She felt the being's agony, its imprisonment, its long, slow forgetting. And in that moment she understood. The choir had not been a weapon. It had been an echo of this entity, this memory, this first note. The song had always been alive, near. Within the vault, the custodian stood before the cradle. He felt the pressure building. Not heat, not weight, but meaning. This being was not just singing. It was calling to others, calling to itself, across time, across the void, across the broken strands of humanity's soul. And something was answering. He looked down at the shards of the choir. They no longer pulsed. They glowed, soft, joyful, like a child recognizing its parent. The vault-keeper looked at the entity and understood. This was the source, the origin of the psychic resonance, of the awakening, of the Emperor's terror. Not chaos, not rebellion, not heresy, but the return of what mankind was meant to become. Not gods, but harmonies. And he had heard it. The Inquisition sent kill orders. They did not know why, only that their highest servers had begun to dream, and those dreams contained music. Entire data vaults began to sing in binary, distorting across the noosphere. Ship cogitators played melodies never recorded. Servitors wept. And across segmentum solar, a single phrase repeated itself on screens, in minds, in dreams. The note returns. The Emperor stirred, not in his body, but in the throne. A single spark of golden thought flickered outward. He had once tried to bury it, once severed it from mankind's soul. It had returned, and for the first time in 10,000 years, the Emperor felt fear. The custodian knelt once more before the entity. You are what we were, he said. The light pulsed in agreement. Can you forgive what we became? There was no answer.
Only a song.
Soft, forgiving, hopeful. And then, without warning, the choir's shards shattered, but not into dust, into light. 6 beams of golden harmony erupted outward, vanishing into the air, vanishing toward the stars. And the vault, now empty, echoed with only one thing, silence. But it was no longer lifeless. It was listening. The stars above Terra gleamed coldly, distant and indifferent to the turmoil stirring beneath their light. The void had claimed the choir's shards, scattering them like seeds upon the dark canvas of the galaxy. Each beam vanished into the endless night, carrying a fragment of hope, or perhaps doom. The custodian stood alone in the vault's hollowed expanse, the echo of shattered harmonies lingering like ghosts in the air. The entity, first note, was gone, vanished into the void where time and space twisted beyond reckoning. He raised his gaze, feeling the weight of 1,000 whispered legacies pressing down. Above him, the golden throne loomed, a silent sentinel watching over the Imperium's fragile dream. Elsewhere, the Adeptus Mechanicus labored feverishly in their forges, decoding the faint psychic signatures the shards left behind. They spoke in hushed tones of a great convergence, an awakening that could fracture reality or forge it anew. The Fabricator General himself mused that perhaps the ancient science of the Dark Age was not lost, but waiting, buried in the shattered notes of a cosmic melody.
Where?
In the Ecclesiarchy's highest chambers, Canoness Val stood before a throng of Sisters of Battle, their armor gleaming with the light of sanctified zeal. Her voice was steady but haunted. "We are the shield against the coming storm," she declared. The choir's song may have been broken, but its echoes will reach the ears of the damned and the divine alike. Across the segmentum solar, whispers grew into roars. Rogue psychers claimed visions of golden beams that pierced the stars, uniting or unraveling all. The Inquisition tightened its grip, hunting those who spoke of the shattered harmony. The custodian retreated to the vault, now empty but alive. The silence was no longer absence, it was anticipation. The shards had scattered, but the song lingered, a lullaby sung across light years. Deep within the warp, a new resonance grew, not of chaos, but something older, something forgotten. A harmony born of loss, betrayal, and hope. The choir was no longer one, it was many. The Emperor, still bound to the throne, felt it, a tremor in the warp's fabric, a question without answer, and for the first time, a flicker of doubt. The custodian whispered into the void. "The song is broken, but the melody remains." He sheathed his spear and stepped into the darkness. The final note was not an end. It was a beginning. The golden throne pulsed with a fragile light, its pale glow flickering like a dying star. The air around it was thick with the weight of millennia, the prayers, sacrifices, and broken hopes of an empire held together by faith and pain. The custodian stood before the Emperor, the man who was both god and prisoner, savior and victim. The shards of the choir had returned. Their scattered fragments reached deep into the warp, stirring unseen currents and distant echoes. The song sought to reunite, to awaken what had long been silenced. But the Emperor's gaze was empty. His will was bound by chains forged in sacrifice. "You summoned me," the custodian said, voice steady yet filled with sorrow. The Emperor's eyes, once bright with purpose, now flickered like fading memories. "I did," he whispered, "to remind you and myself." A silence fell, heavy and profound. "Why try to sing the choir's song again?" the Emperor asked. "Do you not understand the cost?" The custodian lowered his head. "Because silence is not peace, because truth cannot be buried forever." The Emperor's fingers twitched. "I built this prison to save humanity from itself. The choir was a promise and a curse. To awaken it now is to invite destruction. But to leave it silenced is to deny hope," the custodian replied. "We are caught between oblivion and revelation." The Emperor's voice hardened. "Hope is a double-edged blade. It can heal, or it can destroy. Which path will you choose?" The custodian's eyes met the Emperor's. "The path where mankind faces its own shadow. No more lies, no more false gods." The throne flickered, the warp current surging in response. "You would shatter the Imperium's foundation," the Emperor said. "Destroy the faith that holds billions in place. Faith built on lies will crumble," the custodian said. Better to face ruin with open eyes than live 1,000 years in chains. The Emperor's gaze softened for a fleeting moment. Then you accept the burden of that choice.
I do.
The custodian extended his hand. The shards of the choir, now glowing with renewed light, rose to encircle the Emperor. A surge of energy rippled through the chamber. The air crackled with raw power. The Emperor's eyes blazed for an instant with the fire of ancient stars. I grant you the song, he said. Sing it wisely or be consumed by it. The choir's fragments merged, forming a brilliant crescendo that filled the chamber. The custodian felt the weight of countless voices, the hopes and fears of humanity, the betrayals and sacrifices of millennia. He closed his eyes and began to sing. Not with sound, but with will. The song was both lament and promise, a requiem for the fallen and a beacon for what could be. Outside the throne room, the stars seemed to shimmer with new light. The fate of the Imperium hung on a single note. The song began as a whisper, a ripple in the psychic sea beneath Terra's surface, spreading outward like the first breath of a long-drowned world. But it grew, a rising tide of soundless harmony, seeping into the minds of mortals and immortals alike. Some felt it as a yearning, others as a madness. All could not ignore the call. Canoness Val stood amidst her battle sisters on the spires of the imperial palace, their bolters lowered, eyes raised skyward, sensing the shifting tide of fate. "This is the moment we feared," she said softly. The choir's song returns not as salvation, but as reckoning. Across Terra, psychers writhed in torment and ecstasy. The Astronomicon pulsed irregularly, its beacon flickering like a candle in a storm. In the depths of the vault, the custodian felt the choir's melody thrumming through his bones, no longer a song of hope, but a dirge of inevitable collapse. The shards, once whole, were broken again, but their fragments sang in a discordant symphony, tearing at the veil between reality and the warp. Within the throne room, the Emperor stirred. His eyes glowed with the fury of a god pushed to the brink. He raised a hand, sending waves of psychic energy crashing through the palace, silencing the choir's song where it was weakest. Yet the song fought back. It had become something more than melody. It was a living will, a force beyond control. Suddenly the chamber walls cracked, ancient seals breaking under the strain. From the depths below, a figure emerged, not the custodian, not the Emperor, but Malkador, no longer a prisoner of time, his form wreathed in golden light, eyes blazing with unforgotten purpose. "I am the keeper of the forgotten," he declared, "and the choir's song is our destiny." The custodian turned, torn between loyalty and fear. Malkador stepped forward, extending a hand toward the shards. "They are not weapons, nor prisons," he said. "They are the key to mankind's rebirth." A sudden explosion of light enveloped the chamber. When it cleared, the choir's shards had reformed, perfect and whole, glowing with a radiance that bathed the throne room in hope and despair intertwined. The Emperor's voice echoed, thunderous and somber. "Then let the song be heard." The custodian closed his eyes, feeling the weight of eternity. In that moment, the final note hung suspended in the air, heavy with sacrifice and promise. And as it sang, the fate of the Imperium trembled on the edge of dawn. The song ended, not with triumph, not with ruin, but with stillness. Across the throne world of Terra, there was a moment of breath where the galaxy seemed to hold itself in suspension. From the hive towers of the petitioner's city to the deepest forgotten catacombs beneath the imperial palace, all was silent. No prayers, no screams, no lies. The choir had sung, and the Imperium had listened. The golden throne no longer pulsed with the desperate rhythm of a dying god. The coils of the mechanecum stilled. The Emperor, he who had not moved in 10,000 years, sat in absolute silence. The custodian stood before him, his armor cracked, his hands bloodied. He had carried the choir's weight. He had invoked the final note, and now there was only consequence. A faint wind moved through the eternity gate, though no doors had opened. It carried with it a scent unfamiliar to the paladins of the Adeptus Custodes, the scent of old air and of something older still. Freed from behind the custodian, Malcador approached, no longer a shade of the past, no longer a withered echo. He walked with the burden of a soul that had seen too much and dared too long. His staff was broken, his face gaunt. "You broke the lie," he said quietly. "But no lie falls cleanly." The custodian did not look at him. "What comes now?" Malcador looked toward the Emperor. The master of mankind remained unmoving. His eyes, when they blinked, did not blaze with godlight, but with something far more terrifying. Awareness. "The Emperor is awake," Malcador whispered, "but not as he once was." Across the stars, the Astronomicon dimmed. Ships lost their way. The screams of billions of astropaths echoed through the war. A second silence spread, not of peace, but of disorientation. The voice that had anchored the Imperium was quiet, not dead, but no longer willing to sing. The throne had become a tomb. The corpse upon it now watched. Far below, in the vaults once sealed for eternity, the choir's echoes reached the surface of terror. The Adeptus Astra Telepathica, broken and afraid, tried to translate what they heard. It was not language, it was memory. The memory of a species that had dared to dream of stars. A reminder that the Imperium was never meant to last. It was meant to be a path, but paths end, or diverge. And so it was that the High Lords gathered in secret. The Inquisition unleashed its purges. The Mechanicus issued contradictory litanies, unsure whether to worship or disassemble. Some declared the Emperor dead, some declared him reborn, others vanished. In the void left by certainty, terror held its breath. The custodian returned to the throne one last time. Kneeling before the Emperor, he whispered, "Was it worth it?" The Emperor, whose voice had once commanded galaxies, said nothing, but his eyes, now wholly human, watched. And in that gaze, the custodian saw neither damnation nor salvation, only understanding. He rose, turned, and walked away, leaving the throne room behind. Malcador did not follow. The last Sigillite stood beside his old friend. "You always feared what would come after you, but perhaps this at last is something they must face alone." The golden throne dimmed to a dull amber, still alive, but no longer chained. For the first time in 10,000 years, terror belonged to itself. In time, the stars would flare anew, new empires would rise, old truths would be rewritten, and the song of mankind, fractured, flawed, and beautiful, would begin again. But it would not be the same song. The secret wars beneath the throne were over. Now came the silence after the song, and in that silence, a choice.